Hello everyone, Phil here doing a motherboard review. This is a 386 motherboard. It's the M396F version 2.2. Quite a few of these are on eBay, but they're not cheap. I got it a couple of years ago from Eastern Europe. I think I paid just under $50, which was not too bad. And the seller just put it in a bubble wrap envelope, but it survived, and it's actually one of my favorite motherboards. It does come in a few versions with various processors. The version I've got has the AMD 386SX clocked at 33 megahertz. There's also a socket here for a maths coprocessor. It has 4 memory slots, so at the moment I'm using 4 megabyte of memory. Here is the BIOS chip. So that's what the BIOS chip looks like. Here's the keyboard controller and some other chips here. And the chipset, it had a sticker on it, and it's made by PC Chips. And I believe the number here is 314 chip 2, if I read it correctly. What I like with this motherboard, it's tiny. It's like, I mean, my hand is like this. This is really small. It's got an external battery header connector here, but I have actually soldered in a replacement battery. So there was a battery on here which it wasn't leaking yet, but it was close, so I desoldered in and put in a new battery. This is a rechargeable one, but you can use an external battery pack through the battery header. What else have we got? We've got a few jumpers here. If you installing this in a case, I don't do that. I just use motherboards on some test bench setups, but you can hook up your power LED and your keyboard lock here. Speaker goes there, so usually I just use one of these little speakers. It's got a turbo LED which you can connect there. The turbo switch, so I just put in a jumper. If you remove it, it runs a bit slower. If you make sure they're bridged, it runs at the top speed. Reset switch, which allows you to reboot your motherboard, and that's pretty much it. There's one jumper here which I'm not quite sure what it does. Haven't really had much success in figuring that out, but otherwise this is it. 6 ISA slots, and what else have we got here? The keyboard connector, and usually I just use one of these adapters, big one on the end and smaller PS2 on the other end. And for the power, I can highly recommend getting one of these. This is just a power adapter which takes it from the old format to the new ATX format, because I'm always afraid of blowing up my precious vintage gear with an old power supply, which might blow up at any time. Okay, so next let's look at the BIOS screen, and we're gonna do some benchmarks. Okay, let's turn on the motherboard. And we're just gonna check out how all the screens, the BIOS screens and so on, how that all looks. So I've got a 4GB compact flash here, and I've installed DOS 6.22, and I've got my boot menu. If you're interested in that, you can download it from my website. It's easy to just copy paste it onto your retro computer. So I'm just going to do another reboot, and we're going to hit the delete key to get into the BIOS. So this is what the BIOS looks like of this motherboard. Here we can change the date really and the hard drive types, but it has an auto detect feature for the hard drive, so there's no need to manually configure it unless you're doing something special. Here you can configure your floppy drives. I just have a standard 1.44. Actually, I'm using a floppy emulator, which you can also check out on my YouTube channel. Under advanced, we can change the keyboard speed. We can enable a memory test above 1 megabyte and a few other things. There's not much we can do in terms of tweaking performance. It's pretty much a lockdown BIOS, not much to tweak. For example, we can't tweak the ISA clock speed in order to improve VGA graphics performance, but it's not a big deal. We can change the boot order here from A to C. I usually run the auto configuration defaults from the BIOS. That usually leaves me with a stable system. We can put in a password. Auto detect hard disk works fine, so it picks up my 4 GB flash card. Just gonna go with that, and I've got a CD drive on the other one, which is fine, and there's a hard disk utility for some low level formatting, but really nothing else we need to do here. Alrighty, so what we're gonna do now is just run a few benchmarks. I put together a benchmark batch file with various ways of downloading it, from floppy images to CD-ROM bootable images, all ready to go from my website. And it is unique and tailored for 386 computers, so works in computers that don't have a maths coprocessor, for example. And the benchmarks featured is the VGA benchmark version 1.0, PC Player Bench in VGA mode. Then we've got Landmark version 6.0, Top Bench, and also a Norton system info. And it's a batch file, so all you have to do is just run it, write down the results, and press escape after each benchmark. So we're just going to fast forward and we're going to look at the results. So we're getting a benchmark score of 10.0 frames per second. So I'm just going to press escape and we move on to the next benchmark. Okay, so we're getting a benchmark score of 2.1 frames per second. So let's press escape and move on to the next benchmark. So for the Landmark benchmark, we're getting 42.04. And for Top Bench, we're getting a score of 64. And for System Info, we're getting a score of 26.6. Okay, and now I'm just going to give you a bit of a conclusion. It's nothing I can show you in the video, it's just experiences that I've made with this motherboard, and I've been using it now for a couple of years on and off. I really like this motherboard. I highly recommend it. It's very stable, it's minimalistic, so there's very little that can go wrong. It's bulletproof in terms of the BIOS options. You can't really stuff it up, you just load the BIOS defaults and there's no overclocking or any memory timing tweaks and so on. So it's good to go, very stable, still very fast. Comparing to a 386DX with the SX33 MHz chip that I've got in this motherboard, it's on the level of a fast 386DX running at 25 MHz with onboard cache, and that's actually quite impressive. Now, in terms of availability, I had a look on eBay. There are sellers who sell this motherboard, but they're actually asking for quite a bit of money. So obviously word has spread that this is a decent board and you're not going to get it cheap unless you really find a bargain. So if you see this motherboard and it's at a good price, I would not hesitate. I would just grab it. Make sure that if it's got the original battery that you remove it and use an external battery pack or solder in a new battery like I did. Yeah, that's it. In terms of performance, I know a lot of people are chasing 386DX at 40 MHz. In my opinion, that's quite fast, and I think you're better off with a slower 386 because you'll find that a lot of games that are from the 386 era will actually run too fast on a 40 MHz 386. The 40 MHz 386 is really more a competitor to the 486SX. Games like Wing Commander, for example, runs too fast, Test Drive 3 runs too fast, or even a lot of adventure games, the scrolling can be too fast, for example in Space Quest 4. So this motherboard at a equivalent of a 386DX running at 25 MHz is perfect for a wide range of games that were released in the 386 era. As always, hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so. Any questions about this motherboard, just drop me a line. And that's it. Thank you for watching.